He thought it was just another quiet evening. But when flashing lights appeared outside his home and men in uniforms marched toward him, everything changed. They said they were police, demanding he come with them. But something felt wrong. The badges didn't look real, and their words dripped with arrogance. To them, he was just another black man they could intimidate. What they didn't know was that the man standing before them wasn't just a target. He was the FBI's most feared agent. And in that moment, their mistake was about to cost them everything. It had been an ordinary day, one that promised nothing more than the comfort of routine. He finished his workout, brewed his evening coffee, and sat near the window as the sun dipped low. To neighbors, he was just another man living quietly in their community, calm, disciplined, reserved. But beneath that stillness was a life shaped by battles most people could never imagine. The street outside was unusually quiet, too quiet. A car crawled by slowly, its headlights cutting across the pavement before stopping just short of his driveway. He noticed it, but brushed it off. Cars slowed down all the time. Still, the silence carried weight, as if the night itself was holding its breath. He gathered his mail, stepped back inside, and locked the door. Yet the uneasy feeling lingered. Years of experience had sharpened his instincts. He knew when he was being watched. Something about tonight wasn't right. Then came the sound. Heavy footsteps on his porch. Firm, intentional. Not the casual knock of a friendly neighbor, but the stomp of authority. A sharp rap on the door followed, echoing through the house. He froze for a moment, tension rippling through him. They hadn't announced themselves yet. No reason, no warning. Just silence pressing against the walls. And in that silence, a thought emerged. A dangerous one. Whoever was outside wasn't here for conversation. What he didn't know was that the next few minutes would test everything he had survived before. This wasn't just a knock. It was the beginning of a trap, one carefully set, but fatally flawed. The knock turned into pounding. Whoever was outside wasn't patient, and they weren't friendly. He moved toward the door with steady steps, listening. Years of fieldwork had taught him to read situations before they unfolded. And everything about this one screamed danger. Through the peephole, he saw them, men in uniforms. Badges gleamed under the porch light, but something about them felt off. The stitching on the shirts, the way the patches bent, the way their belts sagged under cheap gear. Real officers didn't look like this. These weren't police. They were imposters. One of them stepped closer to the door, pressing his face near the glass. His stare wasn't that of someone seeking justice. It was the cold, arrogant look of a man who believed he had power over another. And in his mind, the man inside was already guilty. Guilty of being black. Guilty of existing where he didn't belong. He backed away from the door, his breathing controlled but sharp. They barked orders now, pounding louder, threatening to break their way in. The neighborhood remained silent. Curtains stayed closed. People had seen, but no one moved. It was the same silence that had protected bullies and abusers for generations. The silence of fear. The silence of complicity. A flicker of anger rose in him. This wasn't random. He had been targeted. They thought they had found an easy victim, a man who could be shoved, cuffed, and dragged away without question. But every instinct in him said one thing: wait. Not out of fear, but calculation. Timing was everything. The pounding stopped. A pause. Then the sound of a voice outside, muffled, urgent. Another set of footsteps joined them. More men. They weren't leaving. They were escalating. A trap was closing in. He scanned the room quickly. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't need to. He was the weapon. His training, his experience, his reputation, it was all built for moments like this. They thought they were hunting prey, but they had cornered a predator far more dangerous than they realized. Still, the weight of the moment pressed on him. He knew what the world would see if this encounter went wrong. Not a decorated FBI agent, not a man who had dismantled criminal networks and faced down international threats, but just another black man written off in the headlines. One wrong move, and his legacy would vanish into the statistics of injustice. Another crash shook the doorframe, which splintered slightly under the force. They were coming in. He steadied himself, every sense sharp, every muscle ready. And in that silence before the break, one chilling thought crossed his mind. They have no idea who they're dealing with. The final strike shattered the doorframe. With a violent crack, the intruders forced their way inside, boots pounding against the hardwood. Their voices thundered through the house, barking threats, asserting power they didn't truly have. To them, this was a victory, another black man cornered, another life they could control. But the man they had targeted didn't flinch. He rose from his chair with deliberate calm, every movement precise, controlled. Years of high-stakes missions had trained him for chaos. This moment, to him, was nothing more than another battlefield. They rushed forward, hands reaching for him, expecting panic. Instead, what they saw froze them in place. His stance wasn't fearful, it was commanding. His eyes weren't desperate, they were calculating. And on his shelf, illuminated under the dim light, sat the unmistakable insignia of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. A ripple of confusion cut through their aggression. Their shouts grew less confident, their steps less certain. He let the silence stretch, just long enough for their arrogance to curdle into doubt. Then, with quiet finality, he revealed what they had never expected. Credentials that carried the weight of fear across criminal networks and even within law enforcement itself. The same men who had stormed into his home realized, in a single instant, they hadn't trapped a victim. They had walked straight into the home of the FBI's most feared agent. The air shifted. Power changed hands without a single blow. And as their bravado collapsed into silence, the truth stood like a blade between them. Every step they had taken, every insult, every ounce of arrogance, it had all been a mistake that would not only haunt them, but expose the ugliness of the system that emboldened them. They thought they were in control, but they had just crossed the wrong man. The room was silent now, heavy with the weight of revelation. The men who had stormed in with arrogance stood frozen, their confidence stripped away in seconds. The fake uniforms that once gave them false power meant nothing against the truth staring back at them. They hadn't just crossed a line. They had stepped into the path of someone who had spent his life dismantling predators like them. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Authority lived in the quiet certainty of his presence, in the reputation that trailed behind his name. These men weren't facing a victim. They were standing face to face with the FBI's most feared agent. A man who had brought down networks far more dangerous than their pathetic masquerade. But as the intruders shifted nervously, one truth lingered sharp and unshakable. If this could happen to him with all his power, all his training, all his status, what chance did ordinary people have? How many others had been dragged away without proof, without protection, without the shield of a reputation to stop the abuse? That thought cut deeper than any threat in the room. Because this wasn't just about one night or one man. It was about a system that saw skin before it saw humanity, uniforms before it saw truth. A system that allowed arrogance to parade as authority until it was exposed. He had survived. He had turned their trap into their downfall. But the story wasn't over. Not for him. Not for anyone who looked like him. And as the night settled back into uneasy quiet, a question hung heavy in the air. How many more lives will be shattered before the world finally decides enough is enough?